Chapter 7, Section 2. Another type of tax. Property tax. Now, property tax is tax on real property. For instance, a house, land, a building that you might own. Okay, a tax on real property. Fair market value. It's the value of the real property that you own. For instance, if you own a house, how do you know the fair market value? Well, you hire an appraiser and you ask him what it's worth. If you were to sell it, how much could you get for it? What's the fair market value? What are other buildings that are similar to it worth? They will tell you, and that's your fair market value. The value of your house. Now, when property taxes are calculated, you do not have to pay taxes on the entire fair market value of your house. You have to pay taxes on what's called the assessed value, percentage of the fair market value. It varies district to district, county to county. Fair market value varies, state to state maybe, I'm not exactly sure. Assessed valuation, the value for property tax purposes set by the tax assessor on a piece of property. Okay, so counties have their tax assessors set an assessed valuation. Now what does that mean? Well, suppose I own a house and my fair market value of my house is $100,000. The appraiser says your house, if you were to sell it today, you should probably get $100,000 for your house. When I pay taxes, I don't have to pay taxes on that entire $100,000. Suppose that my assessment rate, okay, is 65%. So I take my fair market value and multiply by 65%, and I have to pay taxes on $65,000 of the $100,000. I don't have to pay $65,000, but that's the amount that is taxed. The assessed valuation, or the assessed value. And then you have your property tax rate. Okay, that's the rate that you actually have to pay on your assessed valuation. Okay, now, has anybody in here, well, does anybody in here know where property tax money goes? Where does property tax money go? Your parents, if they own something, they pay property tax or whatever on it. Where does that money go? What part of the community? You're sitting in it. School. Most property tax money goes to the school. How many of you guys have ever been through a levy? Nobody in here has been through a school levy? What the school levies are trying to do is raise property taxes. Okay, the tax property tax rate. That's what they're doing. They might say, okay, we have a levy hitting the ballot this year. It's a 0.2 mil renewal or a 0.5 mil renewal. Okay, they may be speaking foreign to you, but after today and after tomorrow, you'll know what they mean. Okay, or they're trying to get more money. Now, if you think about it, schools right now are struggling to get money, right? They're making cuts on sports. They're making cuts on extracurricular activities. Okay, or they're making cuts on teachers, or things like that. Teachers' insurance is going worse. Now, why would that be? If you think about where the money comes from, the money comes from property tax. Most of it, not all of it, but a lot of money comes from property tax at your local schools. The career centers are a little bit different. Okay, where they get their money, but from property tax. Well, what is happening to the value of property? It's going down. So what happens to the property tax income? It's going down, right? So what happens to the schools? They're running out of money. They don't have enough money. Okay, that's what's happening. That's why this is happening. Most of the money comes from property tax. So if the market would go back up, schools would be doing better. Okay, because a lot of property tax money goes to schools. Now, property tax rate, okay, is down like this. Now, on your homework today, I told the other class this. Okay, this is the formula you're going to use for numbers 7 through 12. to use that formula for 7 through 12, so make sure you understand what that is. How does the tax assessor figure out, okay, what's charged for property tax, or how do the schools know how much they have to raise property tax? Okay, or how do they know how much it's going to be an increase? Well, what they do is they take their P, okay, which is the total tax amount needed. Okay, the school says, well, in order to run our school, okay, this is just a basic idea, okay, you got to understand this is very general. School says, okay, we need this amount of money. We need $2 million to run our school. Okay, so what do we need to charge for taxes? Okay, or if we had $2 million, what would the tax rate have to be? Well, they would take everybody that lives in the district or whatever and find the assessed value of the entire district. Okay, I'm going to have you put it on the calculator today. Very much. So I'll just set it right here. So they take what is the property value of our entire district? Okay, and they say, okay, in order to get that $2 million, we're going to divide it by the property value, and that's going to be the rate. That's the rate we have to charge in order to get our money. Does that make sense? And then the schools will say, well, that rate is 3% higher than it was last year, so they go to the ballots and say, we'd like to raise taxes 3%. Do you agree or disagree? Okay, and then people go vote and they say yes or no, whether they agree or disagree. The schools, that's what a levy is. That's in general terms. Okay, is they want to increase property taxes. And property taxes are so expensive that's why they're so hard to pass. Once you see how much people actually pay for property tax, you understand why a lot of people who don't have kids in school and things have a hard time paying more for property tax. Okay, because it's expensive to own a house, even if it's paid for. Okay, there's lots of different ways to express tax rates. Okay, for example, you may live in Tuscarawas County and then you might move to Indiana. Okay. Well, maybe not Indiana because they may do their taxes differently. Okay, so let's say you move to Cincinnati. In Tuscarawas County, they may express their property tax rate as a percent when you get your tax bill, or in Cincinnati, they may express it as mills or dollars per 100. They're all different, but they mean the same thing. Okay, I don't know why they wouldn't just make it a universal thing. Say, let's just call everything a mills, or everything a percent, or everything dollars per 100. Instead, they use 4 different kinds of expressions, or they express it 4 different ways. So you have to be the person who figures out, okay, what you want to do, or what they are equivalent to. So, for example, one way to express it is a percent. That's probably the easiest. Okay, if the tax rate, the property tax rate is 4.87%, and the assessed value of your property is $86,500. You just take your percent and multiply it by your $86,000, your assessed value, not your fair market value, just your assessed value. Okay, so your house might be worth, let's say, $120,000, but you only have to pay taxes on the assessed value. Okay, the $86,500. Your total taxes per year are $4,212.55. So that's coming out of your pocket every year, going directly to the government. That's a lot of money, especially if your bank account is not padded. Okay? A lot of people pay it every 6 months, so they'll pay $2,106.27 or 28 cents every 6 months, or they pay it once a year. What? I think quarterly, every 6 months, and every year is usually what you pay. Another option, which is what I do, okay, when you buy a house, sometimes the bank gives you an option, they call it escrow. Okay, they call it escrow. Would you like to escrow your mortgage? Well, what the heck does that mean? Okay, what that means is the bank takes whatever your property tax is, and they divide it into 12, or whatever many payments you make in your mortgage, and they collect it for you. So instead of paying your mortgage payment, they add the tax, and then every 6 months they pay it for you, or every year they pay the tax for you. So they collect it for you and pay it for you. You just have to pay a higher mortgage. Does that make sense? If you ever get the option to do that and you're not loaded, you want to do that. For instance, I wanted to do that because I don't want to have to pay $800 every 6 months or whatever. I don't even know what my tax rate is because they figure it out for me. My taxes right now are because my bank does it for me. Every year my mortgage amount changes because my tax rate changes, but it's usually pretty close. Okay, but they collect it for me, and they also do that for my insurance. Every year you have to buy homeowners insurance, and it's usually between $800 to $2,000, depending on what kind of house you own. Okay, if you don't want to pay that every year, you can escrow it in. So my bank will collect that and my property tax, and then they pay it for me. Okay, I would recommend this, especially if usually banks require it for first-time house buyers, home buyers. If you're a first-time home buyer, they'll say we require you to escrow. Okay, because you may not. A lot of people have no idea what's coming. They have no idea the bill that's coming in the mail. Okay, in February, a lot of people get them in February, and then they use their tax return to pay for it. That's probably 50% of Americans do that. Okay, if they don't escrow. Okay, another tax rate expression is dollars per 100. For instance, you may go to a county that say, okay, we're going to charge $11.42 per 100 of your assessed value. Well, how do you calculate that? How much you have to pay? Well, suppose I have an assessed value of $42,000. Okay. How many hundreds is that? Well, how do I find that? You just take 42,000 and divide it by 100. So I have 420 100s in 42,000. That's just simple math. Just have to remember how to do it. So then you take those 420 100s that fit in your assessed value and you multiply it by $11.42, your rate. So this person with an assessed value of $42,000 has to pay $4,796.40 a year. Okay? Dollars per 1,000, you solve it the same way that you do dollars per 100, except you divide by 1,000. Okay? So I'm going to, for this example, suppose I have a pretty big house, a pretty nice house, maybe a $250,000, $300,000 house. Okay, and my assessed value, okay, is $197,000, or I own maybe 50 acres, and the assessed value for my house and all my acres is $197,000. Well, how do I find how much I owe? I take my $197,000, divide it by 1,000 to find out how many thousands fit in that. So 197 fit in there, and you multiply that by your rate. So if you have an assessed value of 197,000, you're going to pay $19,329.64 per year in property tax. And then the last one, probably the most difficult and the most common. Okay, once you understand it, it's pretty easy, but this one is common. This one is what, at Buckeye, this is what we use the term mills. Okay, we say, a lot of schools around here say mills. Okay, we want to raise it by 10 mils or 5 mils, or we have a 5 mil renewal, things like that. That doesn't mean millions of dollars. That just means mills as far as their tax rate. Okay, mills. Yeah. So suppose that the tax rate is 46 mils. What that means is how many, how do I say it? That means $0.046 per dollar. So that's 4.6 cents per dollar. Okay, that's just 4.6 cents per $1 of your assessed value. Okay, does that make sense? I'll show you a couple examples of that in just a minute. So suppose I own a house and the assessed value, assessed value is $81,000. Okay, and my rate is 46 mils. Okay, I'm just going to move the decimal point. Okay, move decimal point 3 times and multiply. Okay, so that's what I did here. I took my 46 mils and moved it 3 times to the left. Okay. And that's how you find out how much you owe in taxes. For this one, I owe $3,726 per year. So for half, that's a little more reasonable. I think that's like what, $1,600, $1,650 instead of $2,000. All right, any questions? How to find mills? Mills is probably the hardest. Probably the hardest. Any questions about mills? Okay, the only other thing I wanted to show you. Here's 2008. Here's the state of Ohio property tax rates. Okay, these are all in mills. Okay, these are all in mills. So if we go down, we look at the counties. Okay, we can see what our property tax rates are. Now they vary depending on what kind of property you have. Okay, for example, residential and agriculture. If you own a farm in Delaware County, okay, gross rate and net rate. I remember the difference between the two. Down here somewhere. Okay, gross rate based on assessed value prior to the application of tax reduction factors. So sometimes if you get a tax break, okay, or whatever, the gross rate is before tax reductions. Okay. The C, rate based on assessed value after application of tax reduction factors. These rates are computed prior to deduction of the 10% property tax rollback, 2.5% property tax rollback, and homestead exemption. Okay, basically it's just tax breaks that you get. If you get tax breaks, okay, the government says, okay, we're going to give tax breaks on property tax. So part B is probably, or part C is probably your actual rate. So where's Escrow County? Okay, so it's 43.28 mils. If you own a house, residential house, or have an agricultural area, if you own a farm, okay, it's 43.28. If you own public property, for instance, if you own a building and you run a business out of it, you're paying 48.26 mils, okay, after the reduction. If you own a tangible personal property, what's tangible personal property? I know.
Is it like your house, like you run your business out of your house?
Is it your what?
Like you run your business out of your house?
No. Good guess. A boat, a motorhome. I think those are the only two that I can think of. Tangible personal property. I think you have to pay property taxes on those. I'm pretty sure I don't own a boat or a motorhome, but I'm pretty sure that's what it means. Okay? Those are things, those are tangible personal properties, and your rate is right there. Okay? Yeah. That's why it's hard to pass levies. Because if we want a 5 mil raise, okay, that's going to mean you have 48, 20, and this is in 2008. I don't know what they are right now. I'd have to look on the website again to get new. This is 2008, so this 9, 10, 11, 12, I need to get that updated. Okay, that's 4 years back. Okay, but that's tax rate. That's all I'm going to do to show you today. Your homework is just on page 254 and 255, 1 through 12. It's not a difficult assignment. It's very easy. Page 254 and 255, 1 through 12.